Welcome to our module entitled Conceptualizing Family Work and Getting Started. We both have been family therapists for many years and teaching in social work for the past 20 years. We are passionate about working with families, and we each continue to maintain a caseload and supervise new family therapists at the Calgary Family Therapy Center.
Making the shift from working with individuals to working with families often takes concentration and practice because we see a family as a coordinated unit rather than just a set of individuals. By seeing the family as a coordinated unit and ourselves as practitioners who are invited into the family, we learn to see that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. This is the beginning principle of thinking systemically. So we will be discussing ways to make shifts in the ways in which we talk about problems, shifts about the location of problems and solutions, and shifts about our role as helpers. This beginning module and the follow-up module, working together relationally, will hopefully provide you with some basic ideas of doing family work and stir your interest in working with families.
We all have ideas and stories about families, who they are, what they look like, how they should behave, what values they should have. Here is a story about a family we got to know through our work.
We once worked with a family composed of a single mother and 11 of her children. This was a biracial family living in an impoverished and racially divided part of town. 3 of her children had autism, 4 were teenagers. The family had taken in 2 other children, a niece and a nephew, from the mom. Each child had a counselor or therapist for some issue or concern. Mother had too much to do in taking care of the kids to hold a job. Her only means of transportation was the city bus. Over the years, this mom became an expert on services because she needed so much. As we got to know this family, we witnessed the overwhelming burden on mom to take care of this enormous number of children and all the practical issues that go with running such a big household. There was every reason to expect that this mom was overwhelmed, depressed, and ready to give up. Not only was this not true, she was buoyant and full of optimism. She oftentimes helped us stay positive in the face of near constant difficulties and setbacks. This family taught us that no matter how dire the situation with families, we cannot dismiss a family's desire to succeed and their belief in themselves and their futures. This is not to say that all families are like the one we describe here, but it is to say that we need to consider families as capable of overcoming any challenges they face. We must not count them out when times are tough.
When you think about families and how they work, what stories come to your minds? We assume you have many examples of families who are resilient and capable, families who have faced difficulties and overcame them. You may also know families who are struggling and not doing so well. Families are as varied as are individuals. No two are the same. This makes work with families challenging, but it also makes it fascinating work.
After this module, practitioners will be able to, 1, grasp the difference between seeing families as a system of relationships as opposed to collections of individuals.
And 2, understand some productive ways of beginning work with a family that honors them and what they have been going through.
And number 3, use relational questions that allow families to tell their story in their own words and conveys respect for them.
We appreciate families for how members relate to each other, rather than seeing families as mere collections of individual members or actors. Each family is distinctive from all others. One could say that each family has their own unique fingerprint. Think of your own family, either your family of origin or your family of creation. What are the distinguishing features you notice about your family that are special to your family and unlike other families? What is your family known for or proud of? What marks your family as recognizable and unique as compared to other families?
The connections between members of families are what characterize families or give them their distinctiveness. In our view, the links between family members are more important in family work than the characteristics of individual members. Relationships become our central focus. How individuals make connections, maintain those connections, and modify those connections. These connections are always happening, but we may not consciously think about them. In relational work, we consciously attend to them. A metaphor we like to use is this. In ballroom dancing, it is the dance that is important, not so much the individual dancers. This is our way of saying that we attend to the dance produced by the dancers rather than focusing on their individual performances.
We see relationships between and among persons as the key to understanding human behavior. Individual personality traits often stand out to us, but no individual lives and breathes outside of relationships. This includes positive as well as estranged relationships. To modify a Batesonian phrase, we cannot not relate. All families are unique and not static. Each time you meet them, they will be somehow different, or you will see aspects of their relating that you perhaps did not see before. These relationships are marked by distinct patterns of connections. For example, families might describe themselves as close, or as hardworking, or as loving, or as argumentative. They find words to characterize how they relate with each other, and yet it is important to remember that these descriptions are dependent upon the context or situation in which they are living in at the time.
Families have relationships within and without. There are intergenerational relationships in families, financial relationships, historical relationships, and community relationships. They have relationships with helpers too, and that includes us. These relationships with outsiders are very important relationships that can have characteristics too. In working with families, many authors and researchers have indicated that the quality of the relationship a helper has with the family is likely to be one of the most important variables in whether or not the helping relationship can create change. We live in a sea of relationships every day.
Individuals are best understood within the context of the family. Individual behaviors are often mystifying when examined in isolation. Additionally, individuals can be best supported and helped within the context of their families. The relationships are sources of resilience and strength, even within families who exhibit conflict and are struggling with each other.
The philosopher Marcus Aurelius once said, "That which is not good for the beehive cannot be good for the bees." To help children, we must attend to their families. Families remain one of the most influential elements in a child's development, for good or ill. Families help launch their children into the world equipped to face the challenges out there or with doubts and fears. We prefer to help families to do their best.
We often underestimate what resources families possess. When we focus on the troubles that families are facing or are in, we easily overlook the close connections they have and how they can be mobilized.
Through this module, we will emphasize the importance of shifting our gaze to see families as dynamic entities, even though our prior training and experience has most likely encouraged us to focus on individuals and individual behavior. We are confident that making this shift will allow you to see and hear new and fresh ideas and create new understandings of families' lives and directions, thus evoking new possibilities for change.
The biggest lie in the world that comes from the clothing market is one size fits all. Developmental theories tend to shape our thinking to suggest that persons follow organized, sequential paths in the process of maturing. Even the word maturing suggests a stepwise progression that does not allow for detours and backtracking. The variety of theories posited on stages can lead us to interpret movement as consistent along a pre-known trajectory. A critical comparison with stage theories in daily life often shows us this is just not the case.
Families are as unique as individuals. They need support and encouragement tailored to who they are and what they need. Families have their own styles, communication patterns, hopes, and expectations. You probably have heard of the individual life cycle that outlines the typical developmental milestones of individuals as they mature. Families also have a life cycle where they too go through stages of development over time. These stages suggest a pathway that families follow, but those pathways are very diverse, and each family will traverse its own way through their life cycle.
These spaces between people is where the relationship exists. It is the place of conflict, of togetherness, of potential, of frustration, and of hope. It is the liminal space where interpersonal behavior shows itself. It is also the space with the greatest potential for change, difference, and possibilities. Even as we see the individual persons in front of us, our mind's eye and our words are always on this space where all persons interact. All behaviors are connected. This is one of the shifts that our students find to be the most difficult because it seems to reside in the world of uncommon, crazy, or counterintuitive. Yet when we can see this shift, we know that practitioners are doing genuine family work and will achieve different outcomes.
We learn to ask questions of family members about the spaces in between, spaces where each family member has knowledge and experience. Each family member will most likely see and experience their relationships with others in the family in ways that may differ from others' perspectives. For example, in a two-parent family with two children, each person experiences life within the family from their vantage point. Children will come to experience family life through their own eyes, as will each of their parents and their sibling. They share family space, but their unique position in it will color what they see and experience. Therefore, quote, spaces in between in a family is not a simple, solid, unitary thing. It is felt differently by those members in it, and yet when we develop this special vision, we will be able to see and speak to the behavioral patterns the family creates.
Perhaps another way to say this is that the contact zone between people is where the action is. Individuals are always in relationships. Even separation or cutoff is a form of relationship. We develop who we are as individuals from the relationships we hold within our lives. One might say that any so-called individual traits or qualities are products of our history of relating. Our families help form what we come to think as our individual identities.
When you stop to think about it, who of us is completely an island unto oneself? Who relies on no one or nothing in order to survive and thrive? We believe that complete independence is not only undesirable, it is impossible.
We have worked with many families who were trying to regain the physical custody of their children who had been removed for issues of neglect or abuse. When we reflected on the conditions for the return of the children, we oftentimes remarked that the standards expected of the families were probably beyond what any family could do alone. This is not to declare standards as being too high, but rather to acknowledge that all families get by with the major support from others. Most families survive based upon close interconnections with others for babysitting, moral support, and other basic needs. This is not a bad thing. It is part of living in a community and society. Neighbors help neighbors. This may sound a little quaint nowadays, but the support families give and receive is fundamental to successfully raising children.
Just as individuals are difficult to understand in isolation from their families, families are difficult to understand when viewed as separate from their larger context. They operate in a world of relationships, neighborhoods, economic conditions, religious affiliations, social arrangements. Families are embedded in networks of relationships that impact them in significant ways every day. Those relationships are oftentimes referred to as external to the family, but that view, unfortunately, downplays the influence of those factors on the family. For example, the family's financial condition directly impacts on their daily lives. So issues of unemployment, underemployment, multiple jobs by parents, stress in the workplace, housing costs, price of food, school fees, and medical expenses, just to name a few, have a direct bearing on the family to function optimally.
Look around. Unfairnesses are a part of our daily lives. Different groups at different times feel this: sexism, racism, classism, etc., etc. The world has never been fair to everyone and may always be that way, but injustices are not just to be accepted. We must not be blind to them. If we do not regularly think about this when working with families, we may unwittingly blame a family for a situation that is beyond their control.
Just think back to a time when you were unjustly blamed. How did you feel? How did you respond? Families marginalized by the community or society are oftentimes thought to be less than. This can have many negative consequences for the family and its members. When working with families who have been marginalized, the effects of marginalization are real and should not be sidestepped. It may become a significant part of our work with them.
Some say it is expensive to work with families. On the contrary, we think it is inexpensive. We can work on any and all problems simultaneously. For example, if the family is having challenges on many fronts with more than one of the children, those problems can be addressed together.
Children being cared for outside of their homes is expensive for all of us, both in terms of money and emotion. Helping services usually split up families in order to provide assistance, counseling, respite, financial assistance, medical care, legal advice, tutoring, nutrition help, transportation, and so on. This fragmentation may miss important intersections between these difficulties, and the issues of adequate coordination among the various services being provided poses a significant challenge and financial cost.
If impact and effectiveness of the therapeutic work is factored in, we must work with children in ways that do the job, both in the short term and the long term. Long-term solutions lead us to consider ways to shore up and strengthen the families who are responsible for children. This would also include preventative efforts that would shield families from having serious, problematic relationships in the first place. Investing in all families' health and well-being may be the most profound and long-lasting way to value our children. Individuals are best understood in the context of their relationships. Our world and our helping professions tend to see individuals as freestanding, autonomous actors in the world.
The question, how can you develop a sense of individuals as relational beings, is a challenging one. When you see how people are related and connected, it becomes difficult to return to seeing persons as freestanding, autonomous, skin-bounded entities.
Let us now turn to listening to and engaging with families. Once we see the value of conceptualizing families as dynamic entities, how do we find ways to really listen to them and connect with them? How do we enact this way of seeing families?
Listen to the words the family uses to describe themselves and their situation. Families will explain their situation using certain key words. Pay attention to those repetitive words or phrases. For example, they may describe their situation as, our son just won't listen, or my husband just doesn't care about me or the kids, or my family doesn't respect me. Those descriptors are more useful to work with than introducing professional jargon terms.
Our professional terms, for example, dysfunctional, dysregulated, triggers, boundaries, may be handy for us to use in relating to other professionals, but when we want to set up good working conditions directly with families, we want them to describe what is happening in their lives in their own words. In this way, we demonstrate respect for their views, and at the same time, this allows us to speak more in tune with the ways they understand themselves.
Families may describe themselves in individualistic terms. For example, they may want the family worker to fix a child. Our relational understandings can help us to discuss with families how the, quote, child's problem, as the family explains it, is interconnected with the others in the family. Just as we have learned to see individual behavior as contextually embedded in family relationships, we can add this way of thinking to their understanding of themselves.
We find it helpful to imagine that our client families are hosting us in talking about their lives. As they are our hosts, we are their guests. We must consider how good guests behave. What are the assumptions made when you enter someone's home or begin conversations with them? We look for our hosts to show us around and help us get settled. We are appreciative of being invited in and demonstrate respect for how they see themselves.
An interesting way to look at this metaphor would be to ask the question, what would good guests not do? We think this framing metaphor of our relationship with families creates a respectful platform from which we can work together.
Because we are sometimes referred to as helpers in the general sense of the word, we want them to see us as an advocate for them, to be on their side. In a social system that may many times seem oppositional or threatening to them, they may likely be suspicious of our motives. They will wonder if we really care about them, or are we just doing a job? We want the family to feel our alliance with them.
It may be easy to ally with an individual, but how do we do that when we are talking about a family and there is not necessarily an agreement on ideas, beliefs, or perspectives? How can we align with all members of the family when their polarization among each other may try to pull us in to see one person's side more than another's?
We proceed with the intention of not taking sides, of not splitting families into good members and bad members. Rather, we take a position of being what we call multi-partial. That is, partial to the family and partial to everyone in the family. We are on everyone's side. This does not mean condoning everything, but it does mean listening and understanding how the positions family members take make sense. When family members sense we appreciate their views and ideas, we will be able to converse with the family inclusive of everyone. We will then be able to discuss the pros and cons of all positions because we have not chosen to favor one view over another.
The idea of choosing one side over another in a family is a formula that seems to encourage conflict, not diminish it. Side-taking leaves the person whose side is not taken on the sidelines and out of the action. We need to embrace inclusion, not exclusion.
We want to balance our interest in strengths and shortcomings. To focus only or mostly on weaknesses or problems sends a message to the family that we are primarily interested in that part of them. To focus only on strengths may send a message that we are unwilling to face the challenges of their problems. By showing a balance of interest in the questions we pose indicates we are approaching the family as both strong and struggling, capable and stressed.
Whatever struggles or challenges they have, their resources or strengths will be necessary to counteract those challenges. Their resources need to be nurtured, and we do that by acknowledging them and talking about them. Families who are run down and feeling helpless may find it difficult to recognize and appreciate their competencies. But it is by recognizing these parts of their families that will lead to their being able to use them to tackle their difficulties.
Phrasing of questions that promotes or insinuates hope is always useful and productive. Throughout all family work, one of our most important outcomes is to encourage families to have a hopeful attitude toward their future. We are not suggesting to be dishonest, but we must find ways to phrase our ideas and perspectives that do not wipe out hope. We can usually find hopeful potential in their relational histories. There have been times and places where their lives were satisfying and hopeful, and helping them reconnect with those aspects of themselves may support them in making a better future.
Being isolated is one of the most lonely feelings we can experience. From that place, it may be difficult to be hopeful. We need to be experts in helping families search their connections with others, families, friends, co-workers, or neighbors, to find places of hope.
Let us now focus on how to conceptualize what families bring to us. We are looking for ways to organize our thinking, that demonstrates respect and appreciation for the families we work with, not only for what they could become, but rather what they are now. Starting out believing in them, given where they currently are, demonstrates respect for them.
A key starting point is to work from the assumption that the problems the family is facing make sense if we knew their situation well enough. This is not to say that their problems should exist or remain, but rather it challenges us to come from a position that says that their circumstances flow understandably from their life situation, and our job is to come to know their situation.
We always ask ourselves in working with families, how does this current situation or circumstance make sense? How does this trouble or behavior make sense? We ask our families to tell how the situation they are facing could make sense, because the family may also be mystified as to why this is happening to them. This question will make sense to families and practitioners if one truly believes that the situation is an attempt to solve a dilemma or an attempt to direct everyone to something that needs attention, even if it takes them off track or is unsuccessful. Failed attempts to improve things are still attempts and should be respected for that. For example, how could running away make sense? How could addiction make sense? How could being disrespectful make sense? Remember, this is not desirable, admirable, or even productive, just what is going on such that this could make sense.
If we could get to a place where the family's problems, quote, make sense, we would be in a position to offer help and to go forward toward what they most want. Until we get it, our help will probably be off the mark. The family may sense that our guidance or help does not fully appreciate the pieces of the puzzle they are working with. We urge you to practice multiple ways to get to this idea of how does this all make sense.
This could be a useful exercise with some of your colleagues. Take a situation with a family that is problematic and brainstorm 5 different ways that this problem situation could be understandable, believable, or make sense. This exercise helps us to develop the ability to generate multiple understandings or conceptualizations of families who are in pain.
Assessment questions are not innocent. They reveal to the family what we consider important. Questions that we do not ask similarly reveal to the family what we do not think to be important. Think of the assessment questions you ask families. Would you be able to explain how each question is necessary in order to work with this family? Can you think of 5 new questions that you do not typically ask families that would be useful to ask?
The questions on the next few slides are good ones to help us know the family and their perceptions of their lives. Remember, we are not trying to figure out how the problems they face make sense, so we must know their situation from their perspectives.
Here we offer 4 seemingly simple questions that we think are crucial in moving forward quickly. What is problematic? How is it problematic? What would you prefer? How would you know you were free of the problem?
You can see these questions are what we call open-ended. They are not yes-no questions. They pose a question that allows the family members to fill in the answer in their own ways. They are geared toward assessing the situation, not the people. The you is the collective you, inclusive of everyone in the family.
There will most likely be multiple and differing versions of answers to these questions by the family members. This is not problematic. We expect that not everyone will have the same take on what is going on. We will appreciate each one. When we ask a question, we ask it of the family, about the family. Therefore, we ask it in a way such that everyone can answer. This gives us the best landscape possible. This is our version of addressing that interactional space we referred to earlier. All answers are data or information for us to take into consideration. The more diverse the responses, the richer the description we can develop.
Two more questions that can be helpful in assessing. How much or what parts of this problem would you say are abnormal? How much of this problem do you attribute to normal development or growing up in this society at this time?
Using these questions, we ask the family to place their current problems in a context. These problems they face could be understood in a way that suggests something is abnormal or wrong, or they could reflect something that is normal and expected by many people. These questions invite the family to reflect on their situation as compared to others. They oftentimes think they are alone or unusual when it turns out they are not. We are interested in their interpretations or meanings given to their situation. As family workers, we might think something going on in the family is quite normal, while the family may approach it as abnormal. We need to start from where they are.
More questions. Who should take the lead on getting this turned around? Who has the greatest resources for getting this turned around? What would be indications that we are on the right track? What would you need to see or experience to feel confident that we are making progress?
These questions emphasize the role the family has in helping us understand what would work best for their family in their current situation. These questions invite the family to become a partner with us as we work with them. They are contributing to charting their course. When people feel ownership in what they are doing with others, their commitment level goes up. We see these questions as both assessing and beginning a route toward change.
For the sake of balance, we need to ask questions that are not solely focused on the problem or problems the family is facing. We need to invite the family to comment on other aspects of their lives that may be impacted by the problems currently in their lives. Sometimes when families get deeply caught up in their problems, they cannot see anything else. Asking the family questions about other aspects of their lives, particularly non-problematic aspects, can help them see that they are more than their problems.
These questions are examples of questions that invite the family to consider other aspects of their lives that could serve as resources or other avenues of inquiry.
What are the norms that you as a man, woman, couple, family aspire to in terms of gender, economics, etc.? What are the consequences of changing your family's behaviors to any degree? How does your racial, cultural, religious heritage make your family different from other families you know? To what degree would you say that ethnic difference discrimination plays a part in the problems you are describing?
Here are a couple more questions that invite families to consider their problems from a different angle. The first one overtly asks the family if they feel picked on. This is a question that invites some discussion about potential issues of injustice or discrimination. This further supports the view that we are an ally with the family. We may not personally agree with what the family says, but by virtue of inviting them to talk about it, establishes a relationship of being willing to hear them voice their frustration over being mistreated.
I have often found that families in your situation have some good reasons for feeling angry, upset, and frustrated. Does this fit your experience? Do you think that your situation is temporary or permanent?
What solutions have you tried? With what results? How do you explain that they did not give you the results you would like?
These questions suggest that the family has already been working on solutions to their problems. This acknowledgement is important because it is common for helpers to think that work on the problem begins when the helper enters the scene, and this is a myth.
How would you characterize your ability as a family to be creative or experimental? What criteria must be met as we begin to create some alternatives and solutions to this dilemma? What can we safely say will not work as we create some solutions here?
These questions emphasize the family's ability to be creative and reflect a viewpoint that says they are good partners. These are not trivial questions. They really invite the family to join us in crafting the way forward.
At this early stage of engagement, we stay clear of pressing for solutions or giving advice. We are emphasizing just coming to understand. To pose interventions or attempted solutions would sabotage our goal at this point. We are forming an alliance as we assess. Because families are complex, we need to give time and space for us to learn from them what is going on so their efforts will be maximally beneficial.
A study once asked couples who were in couples therapy for their opinions about how their therapy was going. The researcher was just asking questions about their situation, not offering any guidance or suggestions. An interesting finding of this study was that the couples reported that the interviews with the researcher were actually more therapeutic than their sessions with their therapist. It seems that the couples appreciated just being able to openly talk about their situation without being guided and advised. That open space was seen by them as therapeutic. Therapy sessions with advice or interventions being given was less therapeutic. This anecdote underscores the importance of just coming to know the family through interesting questions that allow the family to express themselves in their own words.
We can ask questions of the family about how we are progressing together. These questions invite clients to comment on the processes of working together with a family worker. The answers to these questions implicate everyone, not just the practitioner. Progress or lack of progress is considered to be a result of our joint efforts of working together. In examining our work with client families, we are looking both for what has gone well and what hasn't. We have put the letter E in parentheses before the word valuative to emphasize that we are trying to appraise the value of what we have done together rather than cast a judgment on it. These questions help us in planning to go forward. This series of questions validates our faith in them and our evolving role as a partner with them.
What level of hope are you at today? Did we make enough headway today? Is the pacing okay? What would you tell others about our work together?
We are asking open-ended questions that invite the family to express to us their sense of how our work with them is going. In asking these questions, we must be prepared to hear their responses and to take them seriously. If we ask for their feedback and then do not incorporate it, they will be hesitant to ever tell us again what they really think.
What do you think I am clearly understanding? What do you think I have still not been able to understand or grasp in the way you were hoping?
Here are two more excellent questions that can provide fantastic feedback for going forward. We urge you to borrow our questions if you like and create variations on them. We also recommend that you be able to ask any question 5 different ways, should that be necessary for comprehension, or to make sure that you get a useful answer.
In summary, questions we use are critical in setting the tone of our working relationship with client families. There are many good questions that invite the family to be experts on their lives and to become full partners with us in our efforts to help. What questions can I create that both complement the family on their resources and invite them to work with me as a full partner?
We hope that this first module sets a tone that appreciates what families do and engages them in ways that values them as persons. Parents who raise children in this day and age are faced with many challenges. If the challenges rise to the level where outside helpers are included, we, as the outside helpers, must demonstrate our respect for the family. Being criticized as parents or as children in a family makes their work of changing just that much more difficult. Our goal should be to facilitate change, not block it. Respecting family members as worthy and capable goes a long way in securing their confidence in making changes in the future.
Module 2, Systemic Relational Work with Families, is an enormous topic, and we hope that Module 1 opened the door to you to become intrigued with working this way with families. The second module in this series goes into more depth regarding how to work with families relationally by exploring the topics of how to build relationships with everyone in the family and relevant persons outside the family, parenting beliefs and understandings, and how to keep track of how you're doing with the family. That's it.